Here's a fact that should make your brain itch. Right now, at this very moment, you're benefiting from the technologies, medicines, navigation systems, surgical techniques invented by people whose names were deliberately erased from history. Not lost, not forgotten, erased. And the reason has nothing to do with the science and everything to do with melanin. I want you to think about that. We live in a civilization that claims to value merit, that worships at the altar of innovation, that tells itself it rewards genius wherever it finds it. And yet, some of the most consequential scientific breakthroughs of the last 150 years were attributed to the wrong people, buried in footnotes, or simply stolen. Welcome back to Arc of Ages. What we're about to do here isn't just recite a list. We're reconstructing reality, because history isn't what happened. History is what got written down, and who controls the pen controls the past. So here's what's really happening in this video. You and I, together, right now, we're conducting an archaeological dig through layers of institutional racism, academic gatekeeping, and deliberate historical amnesia. We're about to uncover 10 names that should be as familiar to you as Einstein, Edison, and Darwin, but they're not. And that's not an accident. That's a choice someone made, multiple someones, actually, across multiple generations. And here's the beautiful thing about truth. It's patient, it waits, and when enough people decide to go looking for it, you can't keep it buried. 10 scientists, 10 stolen legacies, and by the end of this, you're going to be angry. But more importantly, you're going to be armed with knowledge that changes how you see the world. Let's go. Picture this. It's 1916. You're 24 years old. You've just solved one of medicine's most devastating puzzles. You figured out how to treat leprosy, a disease that sentenced thousands to permanent exile from their families, their communities, their entire lives. You've done what no one else could do. And then you die under mysterious circumstances, and the president of your university publishes your work under his name. That's Alice Ball's story, and it makes me furious for reasons I'll explain. Alice Augusta Ball, Seattle, 1892. By age 23, she's the first woman and the first African American to earn a master's degree from the University of Hawaii, not just in chemistry, in anything. But getting a degree was just the opening act. What Alice did next was save thousands of lives. Leprosy, Hansen's disease. At the turn of the century, if you contracted it, society didn't treat you. It disappeared you, shipped you off to colonies like Kalaupapa in Hawaii. Families couldn't visit. You died alone. There was one potential treatment, Chalmugra oil. But here's the problem. It was basically unusable. Thick as molasses, couldn't be absorbed by the body, caused excruciating pain when injected. Patients suffered through the treatment and barely improved. Alice Ball looked at the impossible problem and thought, what if I could change the molecular structure? And she did. She developed a technique to modify the oil's fatty acids, making them water-soluble and injectable. Suddenly, for the first time in human history, leprosy was treatable. Let me say that again. a 23-year-old black woman cured one of humanity's most feared diseases. Her technique became the standard treatment for over 20 years until antibiotics came along. Thousands of people went home to their families because of Alice Ball's genius. But here's where it gets dark. 1916. Alice dies suddenly. Lab accident? Maybe. Illness? Possibly. The records are suspiciously vague. And then Dr. Arthur Dean, the president of the University of Hawaii, takes her research, publishes it, and names it after himself. The Dean method. For decades, that's what they called it. Medical journals, textbooks, scientific papers, all credited Dean for Alice Ball's breakthrough. Now, I want you to imagine being Alice Ball's family, watching the world celebrate a white man for stealing your daughter's legacy, your sister's genius, your friend's life's work. It took until the year 2000 for the University of Hawaii to finally acknowledge what Alice Ball had done. 84 years. That's how long the lie lasted. In 2007, Hawaii made February the 29th Alice Ball Day, which is fitting because leap days come around about as often as the truth does in this story. But now you know, and every time you share this, every time you say her name, you're putting another crack in the foundation of that lie. Alice Ball, remember it. Next up, a man who revolutionized cardiac surgery, trained generations of surgeons, and developed techniques still used in operating rooms today. His salary? Janitor wages. His title? Laboratory assistant. His genius? Undeniable. Vivien Theodore Thomas, born 1910, Louisiana, raised in Nashville with one dream, become a doctor. He saved money, he made plans, and then the Great Depression vaporized every penny overnight. So in 1930, Vivien took a job at Vanderbilt University as a lab assistant to Dr. Alfred Blaylock, $12 a week. That's not a research salary. That's cleaning floors money. But Vivien Thomas wasn't cleaning floors. He taught himself surgery, not from textbooks, from doing it. He built his own surgical instruments. He conducted groundbreaking research on shock and trauma. He became so indispensable that when Blaylock moved to Johns Hopkins in 1941, he refused to go without Vivien. Why? Because Blaylock knew the truth. Vivien wasn't his assistant. Vivien was his secret weapon. They tackled blue baby syndrome, a heart defect that starved infants of oxygen and killed them before their first birthday. Doctors had been trying to fix it for decades. Nobody had succeeded. And here's what's not in most textbooks. It was Vivien Thomas who developed the surgical procedure, not Blaylock. Vivien, he practiced on dogs, hundreds of surgery, perfecting the technique, working out every variable. When he was ready, he taught Blaylock how to do it. November 29, 1944, the first operation. A baby named Eileen Saxon was dying. Dr. Blaylock is at the operating table, but he's not alone. Vivien Thomas is standing directly behind him, telling him exactly where to cut, where to clamp, where to stitch. The surgery is a success. Cardiac surgery is transformed forever. Dr. Blaylock becomes famous worldwide. Vivien Thomas continues earning janitor's wages. He can't eat in the doctor's dining room, can't use the front entrance, can't be called doctor even though he's training actual doctors. For 32 years, this continues. Vivien Thomas trains the surgeons who become legends. He develops new techniques. He saves countless lives. And the institution that benefits from his genius pays him like he's mopping floors. 1976, Johns Hopkins finally awards Vivien Thomas an honorary doctorate. He's 66 years old. At the portrait unveiling in 1971, surgeons he trained came from around the world, grown men, titans of their field, and many of them wept when they saw Vivien's portrait hanging alongside the doctors he'd worked with for decades. Think about this. Every child saved from blue baby syndrome since 1944, every single one owes their lives partially to a man who had to use the service entrance. Vivien Thomas didn't just develop a surgical technique. He proved that genius doesn't care about your credentials, your skin color, or whether the institution recognizes you. Genius just is, and no amount of systemic racism can extinguish it. But it sure tried. Now let's talk about the kind of silencing that doesn't make headlines. The quiet erasure, the missing name in the textbook, the overlooked citation. Because not every act of historical theft involves someone literally stealing credit. Sometimes it's just collective amnesia about who actually did the work. Marie Maynard Daly, Queens, New York, 1921. Her father had to drop out of Cornell, not because he wasn't brilliant enough, but because he ran out of money. That failure haunted him, and it motivated Marie to finish what he couldn't. Bachelor's degree from Queens, 1942. Master's from NYU, 1943. And then, in 1947, something extraordinary. She became the first African American woman to earn a PhD in chemistry in the United States. The first, in 1947. Think about how recent that is. Your grandparents might have been alive when this barrier was finally broken. Dr. Daly's research focused on the chemical processes inside cells, how proteins are synthesized, what makes up the cell nucleus, and critically, how cholesterol affects heart health. Her work on the relationship between cholesterol, hypertension, and heart disease, that's the foundation of modern cardiovascular medicine. When your doctor tells you to watch your cholesterol, that's Marie Daly's research talking. When we understand that high blood pressure damages your heart, Marie Daly figured that out. The dietary recommendations that have saved millions from heart attacks built on her work. She published more than 80 research papers, taught at Columbia University, mentored countless young scientists, established a scholarship fund to help minority students pursue chemistry. And yet, when most people think about heart disease research, they think of who? What names come to mind? Probably not Dr. Marie Maynard Daly. That's the insidious part. She wasn't excluded from publishing. She wasn't denied tenure. She had a successful career by any reasonable measure, but she wasn't celebrated, wasn't elevated, wasn't turned into the household name her contributions deserved. And that matters. Because when we don't tell these stories, we create a false narrative about who does science, who makes breakthroughs, who saves lives. We tell young black girls that science isn't for them, not through explicit exclusion, but through omission, through silence. Dr. Daly didn't wait for the world to recognize her. She did the work. She trained the next generation. She created pathways for others. And now we're making sure her name doesn't get buried in footnotes anymore. Okay, pause. Let me talk to you for a second. When I started researching these stories, I had this moment where I realized this isn't just history. This is active theft, ongoing right now, because most people still don't know these names. And here's what's incredible. You do. Right now, in this moment, you know that about Alice Ball, Vivien Thomas, and Marie Daly. And I've been reading your comments from the last video. Hundreds of you said the same thing. Why didn't I learn this in school? Why am I just now finding out about this? I'm 32 years old and I'm angry. Good. Be angry. That anger is appropriate. That's your brain recognizing that you've been lied to through omission. One of you wrote, I'm studying biochemistry and I've never heard of Marie Daly. She's literally in my field and they never mentioned her once. That's not accident. That's a pattern. But here's the thing. We're breaking that pattern. Every view, every share, every time you tell someone about these scientists, you're rewriting their narrative. You're taking back our history. So yeah, hit that like button. Not for me, for Alice, for Vivien, for Marie. Help their stories reach more people. Alright, next scientist, and I'm warning you, this one's going to hurt. Blood. It's the river of life flowing through your body right now. Your heart pumps it, your lungs oxygenate it, and if you lose too much of it, you die. Before World War II, battlefield medicine had a catastrophic problem. Soldiers were bleeding out faster than doctors could save them because there was no way to store and transport blood to where it was needed. And then one man solved it. Dr. Charles Richard Drew, Washington, D.C., 1904. Athlete, scholar, surgeon, but his real genius was understanding something nobody else had figured out. You don't need to store whole blood. You need plasma. He discovered that if you separated the plasma from red blood cells, you could refrigerate it for much longer. You can transport it. You can build banks of it. And suddenly, battlefield medicine is transformed. Dr. Drew literally invented the modern blood bank system. The protocols for collection, processing, storage, distribution, that's all him. In 1940, he ran the Blood for Britain program, sending thousands of units of plasma to save Allied soldiers during the Blitz. Then he became director of the first American Red Cross blood bank. He's a national hero, his innovations saving tens of thousands of lives. And then, and I need you to really hear this, the American Red Cross decided black blood donations will be segregated by race. Black blood, white blood, stored separately. The man who invented the blood bank was told that his blood, The blood flowing through his veins at that very moment was somehow fundamentally different from white people's blood. Now, as a scientist, Dr. Drew knew this was insane. Blood type is determined by antigens on red blood cells, not by melanin in your skin. The policy wasn't just offensive, it was objectively, demonstrably false. So he resigned in protest. He called the policy unscientific and insulting. The Red Cross didn't care. The policy stayed until 1950. And here's the tragic epilogue. In 1950, Dr. Drew was in a car accident in North Carolina. He was rushed to a hospital, a white hospital. There are conflicting accounts of what happened. Some say he was refused treatment because of his race. Others say he received care, but his injuries were too severe. We may never know the complete truth. What we know for certain is this: he died. The man who made it possible to save countless lives through blood transfusion died in a segregated medical system. Think about what that means. The genius who proved that blood is blood, regardless of who it comes from, was treated as though his life mattered less because of his skin color. Today, when you donate blood, it's not separated by race. When someone needs a transfusion, they get the blood type they need, period. That's Charles Drew's legacy. He proved through science that racism has no biological basis. For decades, his contributions were downplayed, footnoted, or attributed to others. Because acknowledging Charles Drew means acknowledging that a black man revolutionized modern medicine and was still treated as inferior. Dr. Drew saved more lives than we can count, and the system couldn't save his. But we can save his story, and we are. Quick question: when's the last time you used GPS? Today? This week? To get to work? To find a restaurant? To avoid traffic? Here's another question. Do you know who invented it? Most people would guess it was developed by the military, which is partially true, or some Silicon Valley tech bro. Wrong. The mathematical foundations of GPS, the precise calculations that let your phone know exactly where you are on Earth within meters, was developed by a black woman from rural Virginia who grew up picking tobacco. Gladys West, born 1930, determined to escape farm life through education. Bachelor's in Math, 1952. Master's, 1955. And then, in 1956, she's hired by the U.S. Naval Proving Ground in Dahlgren, Virginia. She's only the second black woman ever hired there. The first was also a mathematician, which tells you something about who was being let through the door. Only the absolutely undeniable geniuses. Gladys became a programming pioneer, working on room-sized computers that required punch cards and probably generated more heat than computation. And here's what matters. She was analyzing satellite data and creating mathematical models of Earth's shape. Now, you might think we know the Earth's shape. It's a sphere, roughly. Wrong again. Earth is an oblate spheroid, slightly flattened at the poles, bulging at the equator, and that's not even symmetrical. The surface has variations, bumps, gravitational anomalies. If you want to pinpoint locations accurately from space, you need to account for all of that. Gladys West did that math. Her calculations were so precise, so revolutionary, that they became the foundations for the global positioning system. The technology that powers your phone, your car, airplane navigation, missile guidance, shipping logistics, emergency services, all of modern location-based infrastructure. That's Gladys West's brain in action. But here's the silencing part. She worked in classified military programs. Her name appeared in technical documents that almost nobody read. For decades, her contributions were buried in government archives. It wasn't until 2018, when she was 87 years old, that she was inducted into the Air Force Space and Missile Pioneers Hall of Fame. 2018. Think about how many times you've used GPS in your life. Hundreds? Thousands? Every single day? You've been relying on Gladys West's work this entire time, and until 5 years ago, almost nobody knew her name. She's 94 now, still alive, and because of people doing exactly what you're doing right now, watching, learning, sharing, she's finally getting recognized. But imagine going 60 years without recognition for work that transformed human civilization. 60 years. Every time you check Google Maps, you're using the brilliance of a black woman from rural Virginia who refused to let her circumstances define her potential. Say her name, Gladys West. Cortisone, birth control pills, glaucoma medication. If you or someone you love has used any of these, you owe your health to a chemist who was denied jobs, refused service at restaurants, and had his house firebombed by racist neighbors. Twice! Percy Julian, Montgomery, Alabama, 1899. Grandson of enslaved people. In Alabama at that time, black children weren't allowed to attend high school, so Percy taught himself. When he got to DePaul University in Indiana, he had to take high school courses at night while keeping up with college classes during the day. Graduated valedictorian, got his PhD in chemistry from the University of Vienna in 1931. And then he became one of the most brilliant synthetic chemists of the 20th century. His specialty, taking compounds from plants and synthesizing them in laboratories, making medications that were previously expensive or impossible to produce at scale. 1935, he synthesizes physostigens used to treat glaucoma, becoming the first person ever to do it artificially. 1940s, he develops a method to mass-produce synthetic cortisone, making it affordable for millions of people with arthritis and inflammatory conditions. He also created synthetic hormones that led directly to the development of birth control pills and hormone therapies. More than 130 chemical patents, each one representing a breakthrough that improved or saved lives. By any objective measure, Percy Julian should have been one of the most celebrated scientists in American history. Instead, he was denied professorships at white universities, not because of his qualifications, but because of his skin. He was barred from hotels when attending scientific conferences. In 1950, he bought a home in Oak Park, Illinois, an affluent white suburb. On Thanksgiving night, someone threw a firebomb through his window while his family was inside. His wife and children were home. They could have died. The police caught the perpetrators. Want to guess what happened to them? Minimal consequences. Because in 1950s America, trying to burn a black family alive in their home wasn't considered particularly serious. A year later, it happened again. Another firebomb. Same house. Think about that. Dr. Julian, who was making medication that saved lives, couldn't get a decent night's sleep because white people wanted to kill him for living in their neighborhood. Percy Julian died in 1975. It took until 1990 for him to be inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame. Today, if you take corticosteroids for inflammation, thank Percy Julian. If birth control pills have given you autonomy over your reproductive health, thank Percy Julian. If glaucoma medication has saved your vision, thank Percy Julian. But for decades, students learned chemistry without ever hearing his name, because acknowledging him would mean acknowledging that a black man revolutionized medicinal chemistry while white America tried to terrorize him out of existence. Dr. Julian didn't just do the science. He survived doing the science while people literally tried to kill him for it. That's not just genius. That's courage on a level most of us can't comprehend. All right, next one is going to hit different, because this scientist didn't invent a drug or a technology. She proved that racism damages children's minds, and her research changed American law forever. Dr. Mamie Phipps Clark, Hot Springs, Arkansas, 1917. She earns her bachelor's and master's at Howard University. Meets her husband, Kenneth Clark, there, and they both go on to get their doctorates at Columbia University. In 1943, Mamie became the first African American woman to earn a PhD in psychology from Columbia. But it's what she did with that degree that matters, the doll tests. She took black children and showed them two dolls, identical except for skin color, one white, one black. Then she asked simple questions. Which doll is nice? Which doll is bad? Which doll would you like to play with? Which doll looks like you? And here's what breaks our hearts when we first learned about this study. The majority of black children chose the white doll as nice and the black doll as bad. When asked which doll looked like them, some children became visibly distressed. Some refused to answer. Some cried. Dr. Clark had quantified something that black families already knew but couldn't prove in court. Segregation wasn't just separating children by race, it was teaching black children to hate themselves. Her research became Exhibit A in the most important Supreme Court case of the 20th century, Brown versus Board of Education. 1954. The Supreme Court cites Dr. Clark's research in their decision to declare school segregation unconstitutional. A black woman's psychological research dismantled legal segregation in American schools. But here's the silencing. For decades, the credit went primarily to her husband, Kenneth Clark. He was interviewed, he was quoted, he was remembered as the primary researcher. Mamie's contributions were minimized, footnoted, or erased entirely. It took decades for historians to set the record straight. The doll tests were her innovation, her research design, her psychological insight. She went on to co-found the Northside Center for Child Development in Harlem, one of the first full-service mental health centers for minority children. She spent her career fighting for black children's mental health, proving that racism isn't just policy, it's trauma. Dr. Mamie Phipps Clark looked at black children and saw their pain. She measured it, documented it, and weaponized it against segregation. She proved that separate but equal wasn't just unequal, it was psychological warfare against children. And for decades, her husband got most of the credit, but not anymore. Not here, not in this community. We know her name, Dr. Mamie Phipps Clark. Imagine being nominated for a Nobel Prize multiple times. Imagine publishing nearly 80 scientific papers. Imagine revolutionizing our understanding of how life begins, literally how a single cell becomes a complex organism. Now imagine that despite all of that, you can't get a research position at a major American university, not because you're unqualified, because you're black. Ernest Everett Just, Charleston, South Carolina, 1883. Graduates magna cum laude from Dartmouth, 1907. Only student in his class with honors in multiple subjects. PhD from the University of Chicago, 1916. One of the first African Americans to earn a doctorate in biology. His research focused cell development and fertilization. How does a cell-fertilized egg know how to become a complex organism? What signals tell cells how to differentiate, organize, develop? Dr. Just was the first scientist to recognize the critical role of the cell surface, the membrane, in development. At the time, everyone thought genetics was everything. The DNA inside the nucleus determined everything about how an organism developed. Dr. Just said, no, the cell's interaction with its environment matters just as much. He proved that the cell surface, the membrane that interfaces with the outside world, played a fundamental role in development. This was revolutionary. This laid the groundwork for modern developmental biology, stem cell research, our entire understanding of how organisms grow. He published in the most prestigious journals, Science, Nature, the Journal of Experimental Zoology. European scientists revered him. They invited him to collaborate, to lecture, to work at their institutions. But in America, couldn't get a research position at a white university. Not one. So Dr. Just spent his entire career teaching at Howard University, not because it was his first choice, because it was his only choice. Every summer, he'd go to the Marine Biological Laboratory in Woods Hole, Massachusetts, where his brilliance was undeniable. He'd conduct research alongside the greatest biologists in the world. He'd made discoveries that would be cited for decades. And then summer would end, and he'd have to go back to teaching introductory biology courses while his white colleagues he collaborated with, who knew he was their equal or better, advanced in prestigious research positions. Eventually, frustrated beyond measure, Dr. Just moved to Europe, Germany, France, Italy, places where he was respected for his science, not dismissed because of his skin. But then World War II happened. He was in France during the Nazi occupation. He was imprisoned briefly. He managed to escape back to America in 1940, but he returned broken, physically from the ordeal, emotionally from a lifetime of fighting battles that shouldn't have existed. He died of pancreatic cancer in 1941. He was 58 years old. Here's what destroys me about Ernest Just's story. He spent his entire life fighting two battles simultaneously. The battle to understand how life works, which he won brilliantly, and the battle to be treated as fully human by his colleagues, which America made sure he lost. His research is still cited today. His insights into cell biology remain fundamental to the field. Developmental biologists stand on his shoulders, but most students learn biology without ever hearing his name. Dr. Just was nominated for the Nobel Prize multiple times, but he never won. Some historians believe it's because of racism. Others point to his lack of institutional support, which, of course, was also because of racism. Either way, one of the greatest biologists of the 20th century died without the recognition he deserved while he was alive. And here's the thing about truth. It's patient, it waits, and we're here now, pulling his story back into the light. Because every time we say his name, every time we share his work, we're correcting the historical record. Ernest Everett Just, cell biologist, pioneer, genius. We're almost at number one, but before we get there, I need you to understand something about chemotherapy. Before the 1940s, if you got cancer, you had two options: surgery or radiation. Both were brutal. Both had limited success. And if the cancer had spread, you were going to die. That was just reality. And then one woman changed everything. Dr. Jane Cook Wright, born 1919, New York City, third generation of medical pioneers. Her grandfather, one of the first black graduates of Meharry Medical College. Her father, one of the first black graduates of Harvard Medical School. Jane, raised with the understanding that excellence was the baseline, that she'd still have to fight for every inch of recognition. Graduated from New York Medical College in 1945, one of the only few black women in her class, in a field that was hostile to women and hostile to black people. She could have chosen an easier path. She chose cancer research. At Harlem Hospital, working with her father, she started researching a radical idea. What if you could use chemicals to kill cancer cells systematically? What if you didn't need to cut out every tumor or irradiate every site? What if you could treat cancer from the inside? Dr. Wright pioneered chemotherapy as we know it. She developed techniques for testing which drugs would work on which cancers. She was one of the first physicians to use human tissue cultures to match patients with the right treatment. Personalized medicine before we had a term for it. Her research on methotrexate for breast cancer and skin cancer was groundbreaking. She traveled to Africa and Asia, studying cancer treatments globally and bringing cutting-edge techniques back to the United States. In 1964, and this is huge, she became the first woman appointed to a leadership position at a major cancer research center, associate, dean, and head of cancer chemotherapy at New York Medical College. the highest ranked black woman in American medicine at the time. She published over 100 papers. She trained generations of oncologists who went on to become leaders in the field. She served on the President's Commission on Heart Disease, Cancer, and Stroke. She was a founding member of the American Society of Clinical Oncology. And yet, while white male oncologists were featured on magazine covers as heroes, Dr. Wright's contributions were consistently minimized or erased from the mainstream narrative. Think about everyone you know who survived cancer, everyone who's undergone chemotherapy and lived to tell about it. Dr. Jane Cook Wright is part of the reason they're still here. She didn't just fight cancer, she fought a medical establishment that told her explicitly and implicitly that a black woman had no place at the top of cancer research. She proved them wrong on both fronts. She received dozens of honorary degrees. The American Cancer Society gave her awards. Smith College honored her. But the general public? Most people have never heard her name. Dr. Wright saved millions of lives. She pioneered treatments that remain the backbone of modern oncology. She proved that brilliance doesn't care about your gender or your race. And she did it while being told she didn't belong every single day. But she belonged. She more than belonged. She defined the field. And that's the pattern we keep seeing, isn't it? These scientists didn't wait for permission. They didn't wait for the world to be ready for them. They did the work, made the discoveries, saved the lives. And we're making sure their names don't stay buried. Which brings us to number one. Look around you right now. If there's electrical light in your space, a lamp, an overhead light, the glow from your screen, I want you to really see it. That light exists because of the man I'm about to tell you about. Not metaphorically, literally. The technology that makes electrical lighting practical, affordable, and accessible to everyone was perfected by a black man whose name most people have never heard, Lewis Howard Latimer. And his story is the perfect distillation of everything we've been talking about today. Born in 1848, Chelsea, Massachusetts, his father, George Latimer, was a fugitive slave whose freedom trial became one of the most famous cases in Massachusetts history. So Lewis grew up knowing what it meant to fight for basic human dignity, for the right to exist, for recognition as a full person. At 15, he lied about his age and enlisted in the Union Navy to fight in the Civil War. Served with distinction, came home and took a job as an office clerk at a patent law firm in Boston. But Lewis Latimer wasn't built for clerking. He taught himself mechanical drawing, taught himself drafting, became so skilled that he was promoted to head draftsman, creating the technical illustrations for patent applications. And in 1876, he created patent drawings for one of the most important inventions in human history, Alexander Graham Bell's telephone. Yes, that telephone, the one that changed human communication forever. Lewis Latimer drew it, made it patent ready, made it real. But he didn't stop there, not even close. Late 1870s, early 1880s, Thomas Edison and other inventors are racing to perfect the electric light bulb. The problem wasn't creating light. They could do that. The problem was making it last. Early bulbs burned out in hours. They were expensive, impractical, basically unusable for mass adoption. Louis Latimer looked at the problem and thought, what if I could make a better filament? And in 1881, he invented and patented an improved carbon filament that made light bulbs burn longer, brighter, and more reliably. Not just a little better, dramatically better. His design used a cardboard filament that was more durable and more cost-effective than anything that came before. He didn't just improve the light bulb, he made electric lighting economically viable for regular people. But wait, there's more. He also invented the threaded wooden socket. Yes, the part that screws into lamps. That's his too. He wrote the first comprehensive book on electric lighting, Incandescent Electric Lighting, a practical description of the Edison system. He supervised the installation of electric street lighting in New York, Philadelphia, Montreal, and London. He personally wired entire cities. He worked for the U.S. Electric Lighting Company, then for Thomas Edison himself. Louis Latimer didn't just invent the technology, he implemented it. He taught others how to use it. He wrote the manual. He built the infrastructure. He lit up the world. And yet, when we think about electric light, we think of Thomas Edison. We think of the Wizard of Menlo Park. We think of genius, innovation, American ingenuity. We don't think of Louis Latimer. In 1890, Latimer was hired by Edison's legal department to defend Edison's patents in court. He became one of the Edison pioneers, an elite group of innovators who worked with Edison on electrical systems. Look at that photo. Count the black faces. One, just one, Louis Latimer. He spent decades in Edison's shadow, his contributions minimized, his name relegated to footnotes. But here's what the historical records couldn't erase. Louis Latimer wasn't just a scientist. He was a poet, a painter, a musician, a civil rights advocate. He taught English to immigrants at the Henry Street Settlement. He was a founding member of the Flushing, New York Unitarian Church, which welcomed black members when others wouldn't. He lived a life of dignity, creativity, and purpose. He refused to be diminished by a world that tried to make him small. Louis Howard Latimer died in 1928. For decades after, his contributions were footnotes, afterthoughts. Oh, yeah, there was this black guy who worked with Edison. But then, slowly, the truth started emerging. 1968, his home in Flushing was designated an historical site. 1988, it became the Louis H. Latimer House Museum. 2006, he was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame. And now, right now, because of communities like ours, people committed to uncovering buried history, millions are learning his name. Louis Latimer lit up the world, literally. Every time you flip a light switch, you're using technology he perfected. Every time you screw in a light bulb, you're using a socket he invented. Every time you benefit from electric lighting, you're standing in his legacy. And they tried to leave him in the dark. But here's the thing about light, and here's the thing about truth. It always finds a way through. 10 scientists, 10 minds that changed the world. Alice Ball cured leprosy, had her work stolen by her university president. Vivien Thomas revolutionized cardiac surgery from behind a white doctor's shoulders, paid janitor wages. Marie Maynard Daly unlocked the secrets of heart disease, barely mentioned in the textbooks. Charles Drew invented blood banks, died in a segregated hospital. Gladys West, her calculations power every GPS system on Earth, went unrecognized for 60 years. Percy Julian synthesized life-saving drugs while racists firebombed his home. Mamie Phipps Clark proved segregation damages children's minds, ended legal segregation, got less credit than her husband. Ernest Everett Just revealed the mysteries of cellular life, couldn't get a research position he deserved, died at 58. Jane Cook Wright pioneered chemotherapy, saved millions. Most people have never heard her name. Lewis Latimer lit up the world, left in Edison's shadow. These weren't just scientists, they were warriors on 2 fronts. They fought to understand the universe, and they won. Their discoveries are embedded in the fabrics of modern life, but they also had to fight for their basic humanity, for the right to be recognized, for the right to be treated as equals. And on that front, the institutions failed them. The systems failed them. History failed them until now. Because here's what's happening right now. In this moment, you know their names. You know what they did. You know what was stolen from them. You know what they achieved despite everything, and you're not going to let them be forgotten again. This is what we do at Arc of Ages. We don't just learn history. We excavate it. We pull it from the archives. We dust it off. We hold it up to the light and say, this happened. These people existed and they mattered. In the comments right now, and I mean right now, pause the video if you need to. I want you to tell me which scientist's story hits you the hardest. But most importantly, what else should we cover? Because I guarantee there are hundreds more stories buried in the archives waiting for us to find them. Drop names, share research, help us build this library of stolen legacies. If this resonated with you, hit that like button. Not for the algorithm, for Alice, for Vivien, for Marie, and Charles, and Gladys, and Percy, and Mamie, and Ernest, and Jane, and Louis. Help these stories reach more people. Subscribe and turn on notifications because we're just getting started. More silenced voices, more hidden history, more truth. Share this video. Send it to a young person who needs to see themselves in science. Send it to a teacher. Send it to someone who thinks Black history is only about struggle. Show them it's about genius. Here's what we need you to understand. These scientists were silenced, but they were not defeated. Their work survives. Their legacy survives. And every time we speak their names, every time we share their stories, every time we refuse to let them be forgotten, we break the silence a little more. You're not just a viewer. You're not just a number in the subscriber count. You're a part of a community that's rewriting history, that's reclaiming stolen legacies, that's making sure the next generation grows up knowing that people who look like them have always been at the forefront of human innovation. That's the world we're building, right here, right now, together. It starts with knowing their names, so say them with me. Alice Ball, Vivien Thomas, Marie Maynard Daly, Charles Drew, Gladys West, Percy Julian, Mamie Phipps Clark, Ernest Everett Just, Jane Cook Wright, Lewis Howard Latimer. Say them out loud, remember them, share them, teach them, because the arc of history is long, but it bends towards truth. And we, this community, we are the ones bending it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being part of something bigger than yourself. I'm Max Winkler. This is Arc of Ages, and I'll see you in the next excavation. Goodbye.